Today's media landscape isn't what it once was. Media channels that were once thought to be imperishable and evergreen have become less important than they once were to advertisers, and new technology has led to the development of new media channels that are reaching broader audiences and new markets in brand new ways that were unimagined only a few years ago. It's because of these changes that the purposes of ad testing are more important than ever. Hello, I'm Duncan McGregor, the Marketing and Communications Coordinator in Insightrix Research in Saskatoon, Canada, and your podcast host. In this, our 7th episode of Stories of Market Research, the Insightrix podcast, we're discussing advertising testing and market research, how it's being used, results businesses are looking for from their advertising efforts, and how the practice has changed to keep pace with a media terrain that has transformed drastically in recent years to provide workable recommendations and beneficial outcomes. For this episode, I'm joined by Partha Roy, a Senior Research Executive here at Insightrix, as co-host. With him, we speak with Majid Khoury, an advertising and brand research specialist, to look into the place ad testing has in today's fractured media landscape and some of the ways some researchers are staying ahead of the curve to help their clients produce amazing and, more importantly, effective advertisements. Minimizing risk, making what's good even better, and doing it all in a brave new world for advertising. All that and more coming up next on Stories of Market Research, the Insightrix podcast. I'm here with Partha Roy, a Senior Research Executive here at Insightrix Research. How's it going today, Partha?
It's going good. It's been a great day so far, and I'm really excited to talk to you about content and ad testing.
Yeah, we're actually talking about just that, advertising testing in market research, how it's done, why it's done, new emerging trends, all that stuff, and much more. In the episode, we're joined by Majid Khoury. He's an advertising specialist from Vancouver who was nice enough to lend us some time when he was in town in Regina. I really enjoyed talking to him, didn't you, Partha?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had a great chat with Majid the other day about content testing and about media landscape in general. Mm-hmm. And I think we had a good discussion about some of the challenges and how we are addressing it with the different clients.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to have a more detailed chat with you this time as well.
Excellent. Well, let's let our listeners check that conversation out. That's coming up next. And we'll be back after that segment to talk a little bit more about advertising testing. All right, I'm here with today's co-host, Partha Roy, and our guest for the episode, Majid Khoury. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Well, today we're talking about ad testing as it relates to market research. Before we get started, though, perhaps, Majid, you could tell our listeners a bit about your background?
Sure. I've been working in marketing research for the last 31 years now, and it's always been in advertising research. I started my career with a company in Montreal called Tandem Research that brought a lot of innovations in ad research to Canada, and I worked with them for 9 years. Then I moved west to Vancouver, started my own company in market research specializing on ad testing and evaluation, and then that was purchased by Ipsos ASI, the arm that focuses on ad research. And 9 years later, I'm on my own for the last 8 years, still working in advertising research as a research specialist, working with different clients to figure out the best ways to implement advertising research in the big context of market and brand research.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot for being here today. We really are going to benefit a lot from your expertise on this, and really looking forward to chatting with you. You too, Partha.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have Majid in front of us. And I think, we can start with something really as important as why is ad testing so important among some of the clients that you work with?
I mean, for me, ad testing is minimizing risk. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows how much investment goes into thinking about advertising strategies, the whole creative process, producing the material, as well as the media investment, which is very huge. So to end up investing what usually amounts to 5% or less of your media investment to test advertising is definitely important to the process. Mm-hmm. And for me, it splits on 3 different areas. One area is making sure what you're talking about is relevant to your consumers, and that's where it's the early part of the process where you're testing strategy. Mm-hmm. Are we saying things that are relevant, differentiating? Think of it as the story. And then you could progress to testing creative, which is the way you tell that story. Now, what I find many advertisers are hesitant about testing creative, and I'm with them. You don't want to have a bunch of people in a focus group room talking about the color of someone's shirt, but you still need to understand reactions and emotional engagement with the creative idea. And there's nothing wrong in testing this at an earlier stage when you haven't even shot any videos at the concept level, etc. And then there's also the advertising tracking to evaluate how your advertising is doing in context of your own spending and what the competitors are doing out there.
So just curious, how does it differ than other kinds of research, like, say, brand research?
I mean, what I find with ad testing, and that's why I stuck to it for so long, is the fact that from a technical point of view, we find we can get away with less methodological rigor because sometimes you need to really understand what's behind numbers. So you really need to be creative in how to get that out of respondents.
There's a bit of art involved.
There's a bit of art involved, and the same with the analysis, where when you're looking at brand research, market research, etc., you're looking at what these numbers are telling us. In advertising research, you're trying to help that advertiser do a more optimal job of their advertising, whether it's creative, media, or strategy. And to really do that, you need to understand not only what the research and the consumer is telling you, but also what the challenges to the advertiser are. So if you're going to say there's an issue with this creative idea, you need to understand what does that mean to the advertiser.
Sort of understanding both sides.
Both sides of the equation. So you can't say, oh, you need to be on television when they have a budget that doesn't allow them to be on television. You can't say, well, you have to go and do something like this when creatively you're recommending something that's impossible to execute. So I find myself having these kinds of discussions with agencies and trying to look at the data from a more practical business angle, not only from what the data tell us. Whereas when you're doing some other kind of segmentation, brand research, you need to rely more heavily on what the data in absolute is telling you.
So that brings to the point, Majid, that when you work with our clients, do you kind of do it in a much more collaborative way with the agencies who are involved in developing the ads and also bringing the clients, both the parties, kind of together?
I find that I call it the triangle, is the best way to look at it, is to have the agency, the client, and the research in advertising research work together as a team. So this way we can go to the agency and ask questions. The agency can tell us what they're thinking about, get our opinion before talking to the client. The client and the agency can come to us together, and this way you end up going back to the challenges from a business side. You end up understanding the challenges of everyone very well. The other thing that I find really working well, and I've been trying to do more of that recently, is what I call co-research. Is you're working with the agency and the client to really work together on what is it that we want to measure?
Absolutely.
How best to do it? Even looking at the data together and say, well, this is what I'm seeing in it. How does work for you? And then before you bring that report together. And these kinds of things, which I call like co-creating questionnaires, co-analyzing, allows us to do a better job as a team, way more so than just deliver that report and walk out.
Yeah, and I think, Majid, you really put it so beautifully, because when we get both the parties together, it kind of brings a coherence, a lot of collaboration among ourselves, and also, as you rightly put, that it's not about measuring, or it's not really about pass and fail. It's more about making things better, right, for both the parties.
You see, and the pass and fail is a good point to bring up, because that's what creates a lot of resistance from ad agencies to copy testing, specifically at advertising research, because most of the models of the past are based on a score.
So like A/B testing,
Exactly.
stuff like that.
It's like you do the score or not. I never look at it that way. I like to include a lot of open-ended questions. It's all about how this is working, how can you do it better?
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
not about the pass or fail, because every category has its own nuances, every target has its
Yeah.
own nuances. You can't just compare something to everything else out
Yeah,
there.
completely resonating with your thoughts there, Majid. And also the other thing is when we work with a lot of our clients here in Saskatchewan, we have seen that a lot of the other ad hoc work that we are doing with them, we can bring those values when we are doing a brand or ad testing with them on the table, and they really kind of appreciate that. So do you see a lot of these integration that is happening to put things in perspective?
Not as much as I'd like to.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah.
because I find
Being
the
very
limita-
candid enough here, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the limitations are a resistance of research companies to share what else they're doing with
Partners.
other
Yeah,
partners.
partners involved, yeah.
Where, I mean, working with Insightrix, you guys do it extremely well. And the other thing is resistance of the clients to think of it in that way. Because some clients think is, no, I don't want my strategy research team to talk to you when you're doing advertising research, because they're going to bias you. It's like,
Oh,
how
yeah.
would they bias me?
Yeah.
So it's really a resistance sometimes from the clients themselves to bring all this information coherently under one roof to
That's
really get
would
the
be
most
quite,
out
quite
of
a bit
it.
of challenge there. Yeah. So again, talking about the spectrum, you mentioned about like you have spent 30 years in this industry. Did you see that in the earlier stages when there was a greater role of traditional media, TV for instance, the way how we used to measure things, that has kind of changed over a period of time with new media, with more digital media coming into play? Is it something that we as researchers or we as testing the approaches kind of changed over a period of time? Do you see that happening?
It's really a recent change because, yes, traditionally it was very easy. You have television, you put bulk of your creative money, bulk of the media money in it, you measure it straightforward. Now you have all these things. And what I'm finding, just like marketers and agencies, especially the media agencies, are learning how best to deal with all these options and fragmentation, we're dealing with the same challenge, is how best to do it. And there aren't wrong and right answers at this point. We're all experimenting. One of the things we're seeing is that we're moving from measuring television versus pre-roll to measuring video.
Oh, okay.
You have that same video and people, you ask them, where did you see that video? And 90% are going to tell you on television, while 90% of the budget is on pre-roll. So we start looking at it as static versus video instead of a medium. We start looking at, given the fragmentation, it's not about recall of an execution by medium, it's recall of the full campaign across different media where each touch point is adding something. So if you have a campaign around a certain brand message that you're using videos online and on television, radio, billboards, Spotify, what I'm finding over and over again these days is that each channel is adding a certain level of recall of the whole campaign, that you can't rely about how only your video recall is doing, but how everything all together is doing, to put more emphasis on what I call campaign recall. And worry less about where it's coming from because it's so fragmented out
Yeah, makes complete sense. So Duncan, do you skip a video at times when you are on YouTube or any
All the
other?
time. All the time. Yeah. If it doesn't have anything to do with me, I'll usually just
And
skip
how
it.
soon do you skip it? Like in a couple of
A
seconds?
second, it says that skip ad pops up.
Oh, okay.
That allows me.
So Majid, if consumers in general, as Duncan mentioned, kind of skip ad at quick frequencies, that a lot of media wasted dollars, I guess?
Well, there is a media wasted dollars, but is that their fault or our fault? In some of the recent national studies I've looked at, what I found is, yes, 80% of people would skip an ad, but then there are some who watch it. People get engaged with engaging advertising. There's still brands out there that are doing exceptional job at being recalled and enjoying the ads, but I think we're seeing less and less examples of those that is creating a negative reaction from viewers towards advertising. So I'm seeing year after year increased apathy to advertising in general. I hate ads, I don't want you to talk to me, etc. But at the same time, there are some great examples of good ones. So is it that we're not trying enough, or is it that the public is becoming more demanding?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Because there's tons of examples out there of people happily engaging with advertisements. You see that every Super Bowl season,
You
right?
see the Super Bowl seasons, the Olympics ads.
Yeah.
I've seen some 60-second YouTube videos that people are sticking to the end of it. Like, God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think you really put it beautifully that a lot of these intrigueness has to be there when it comes to new media, right? So on that note, Majid, one of the things which we also see is there's a way by which we kind of used to do a lot of our ad testing on traditional media. As you rightly mentioned, some of the questions have changed, some of the ways by which we evaluate digital media that has changed. So do you see that enough research and development and is happening in that pace, and we as market research agencies or providers are able to do a good job to keep up with some of the changes that are happening in the market?
I mean, there's a lot of innovation how you could test when you have this multiple media, the video versus the billboard versus your own website about it, etc. However, they're not scalable. They tend to be expensive because you have to start off looking at these different elements and how they come together. So most of the products that are being developed or out there by the big research providers tend to be on the expensive side. I'm starting to approach it differently. So rather than testing the video, is really expose people to everything. Show them 3 of the videos, play the radio ad, show them the posters.
Sort of a holistic campaign look at things.
Show them all of this, and then let's go through it, and then you can compare it to a control group that doesn't see anything. So you keep the principles of testing a TV ad, but you do it on a big campaign level. I mean, it's still something I'm dabbling in, so I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it really tries to reflect reality. Because if we're seeing that people are seeing part of the campaign on part of the media, with some of them are seeing all elements, let's reflect it that way and try to tease out how one element is doing better than the other, as opposed to a very complex design that tries to talk to each element separately and then bringing it together.
Yeah, no media element exists in a vacuum, right? Exactly. So you're going to be experiencing them all holistically. You might as well strategize that way, right?
Yeah, same with our clients here. Frankly speaking, a lot of them have moved a lot of their traditional media budget to online and digital media. So more we are getting this kind of requests and thoughts to put in place. And one of the things which we realize is still, as you rightly mentioned, that it's at the end of the day to kind of evaluate the content and the creative. If that is strong enough, that will cut through across any channels. So that's being rightly put. So Majid, getting back to, you touched on the point of cost and efficiency. So do you think is that something that we are able to provide timeliness of deliverables to our clients, and at the same time provide really value for the cost that they pay for testing creatives?
I mean, we have to evolve with the times. People are doing things faster. They're having less time in between. So we need to do it. And the way it's done, last week I finished a testing in 7 days from the time I got the call about the project.
Oh, right on.
It's exhausting, but it's not impossible when you have an approach in mind, when you have a client that's willing to work with you very quickly, that you could put together that questionnaire, get their approval day 1, day 2 program, day 3 get data, and then I find I just have to lock myself for a day and delve into the data and forget about these big endless reports. You go through the data and you write the story in 15 slides, you're done. So I think it's more our thinking from a research point of view and researchers about how to tackle this in a way that makes it faster and cheaper without jeopardizing the quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it completely kind of makes sense, because that's something, as you rightly mentioned, the 7 days of turnaround, and that's something which we are within Insightrix and are trying to achieve, kind of 5 to 7 days of turnaround time for our clients, so that they get faster results. And as you mentioned, they don't have to wait for a full report of innumerable number of pages. Instead, a very short summary is what they need to kind of make the next steps and decisions. Yeah. So Majid, you mentioned about early creative development testing. So do you see that a lot of our clients, when they start the early creative development process, do they really get a long-term benefit in terms of starting it really early and then going through the different iterations or stages?
Definitely. However, what I find is that research isn't necessarily introduced into the equation early on. So everyone thinks of advertising research as tracking evaluation at the end, but if you were to choose where to put your advertising research dollars, I recommend you put it up front, because as you're going thinking about the whole what should we do, how should we talk about the market, who is the market, what are these different personas we want to focus on, what do they think of life in general. I mean, that's where some of this research would be way more valuable to really help you talk to them in a more relevant manner and in a way that they can really absorb your message.
So do you see a lot of our campaign development, especially with the clients that you work in, they kind of start with insight that they work with, or is it like in-house research from which the research agency and the client kind of comes up with one big idea and try to nurture it? Do you see that happening?
Not really. I'm seeing a lot of thinking and insights, from agencies are spending more time on that, clients are spending more time on that, and sometimes they do some informal research, desk research, etc. But what I find is gathering the insights is one thing, coming out with what does the insight mean from an advertising strategy point of view, but then ensuring that strategy is relevant and differentiating. That's what's not happening. Many are going with their gut feeling or sitting in a room together and deciding which of three different directions is better. And that's the part where I feel the money should be spent at, which is, okay, we have these three different directions. Forget about creative. I refuse to do strategy testing with any visuals around it. It's like the statement. Using our brand means that you're X, Y, and Z versus A, B, and C, and test that premise in terms of motivation, likability, differentiation, what could they do wrong, which words are really appealing. There's lots of tools about that, and get to the right strategy, which is the story. And then, as Ipsos always taught us, is successful ad is a good story well told. And what I find is the way you tell the story is the creative, and sometimes even from research we spend more time and money on testing the creative than testing what the story is to begin with.
That's so true. So Majid, the other thing which I would like to understand from you, especially from the experience that you have and working with other clients, so how are you doing with benchmarking, with norms when testing all different type of media?
I mean, and that becomes challenging because as the whole environment is changing very fast, benchmarks are changing very fast. If I look into my tracking norms year by year, they're changing year by year. This is something I haven't seen in my 20 years prior to the last 10. So then what's the right benchmark and what's not? We're getting a lot of social marketing these days, cause marketing. I mean, they deal with completely different benchmarking scenarios where you don't need to enjoy the ad, but it has to be powerful and relevant, and getting your attention. So I'm starting to use benchmarks if they're available as directional, again, rather than this pass or fail idea, which may not work just because your benchmarks may not be relevant anymore or change on you very fast or not the right thing. And so I usually focus on similar case studies that I've seen where things work and things don't, and apply that learning as opposed to letting the numbers just tell us if it's good or bad.
Is when we work with a lot of our newer clients, we get to see that they want specific norms in certain categories. So we have adopted the best practice of testing some of their ads and then benchmarking it against what they feel as the best ad for competitor that is there in the market. In that way, we are trying to kind of provide them more context and more results. So is it something which is done across other markets as well?
It's definitely the best case. I mean, first of all, I haven't seen norms and benchmarks change that drastically by category, except like for social marketing over the years, and I still don't see it. The other thing is, if you're already doing any evaluation, who cares about norms? You're talking to your target, who's relevant to you and your industry.
Yeah.
You can inject to a couple of your competitor ads and change that every week. So by the end of the quarter, you have that tested every competitor's ads, and you have that benchmark with among your own target of your ad against the competitor. It's an easy to do approach. I don't know why not many do it, but a couple of my clients, every time they catch a competitor ad on air, we inject it in the tracking, we take it out. 2 weeks later, we inject it in again, and before you know it, at the end of the year, we have 30 competitive ads approach. That's way more powerful than any general norms or benchmarks.
Okay. Well, is there anything else that you guys wanted to discuss?
I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think there's much more that we could cover other than, well, we could sit here for hours and talk about this, but honestly, covering it on a top level, I think this has got it. So I really want to thank you both for joining us, especially you, Majid, flying all the way out from Vancouver. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be in Saskatchewan with you guys.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And always to kind of, when we get a sense of how the industry best practices are going on and how other clients are doing it, it kind of fits into a lot of our thinking
100%.
and kind of work much more closer with our clients here in Saskatchewan as well.
All right, on. Well,
Great.
thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
That was a great conversation, don't you think, Partha?
Yeah, we had a really good conversation the other day with Majid regarding some of the changing landscape that is happening in the advertising world.
Yeah.
Along with it, some of the ways by which we are approaching our client to test content. So, we are moving into exciting time ahead.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to talk to you about the changes in the media landscape because Majid got into that a lot, and I think it'd be really great for us to unpack that a little bit. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Absolutely, Duncan. So what we have seen through some of the syndicated studies that we have worked in Saskatchewan, we saw that some of our Saskatchewan residents are more using new kind of media. They're more into social media, they're more into online videos, and that's at the disposal of the handset devices, the smartphones that they have in their hand.
Mobile stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So that what is changing a lot of the time that they are spending online and the way how they are consuming media.
Has our approach changed much with these new channels coming into play?
Yeah, absolutely. We are adapting to changes all the time, especially with our ad check program. We are trying to bring in new solutions which kind of help them to understand and interpret the new media better. By new media, I mean a lot of these online content evaluation, a lot of the social media content evaluations. So we are making it much more faster, much more cost efficient, and at the same time able to bring in a lot of value through the detailed insights that we are able to generate through our ad check program.
And some of the things our clients are looking from Insightrix in this respect.
Yes, we have a lot of our clients who are using these results, taking it with their ad agency, and are able to add much more value. The reason being because a lot of these clients are starting it early in their creative development process and able to take advantage of our ad check retesting module and use it to develop and enhance their ads. And as I told, it's not restricted to one side of one part of media. It can be applied to online channels, it could be applied to social channels, it could be applied to print, radio, and in that way they are able to come up with more efficient creatives across different channels.
That's definitely a benefit. Are there any other benefits you can think of?
The other benefit which I see often with a lot of our clients is they get understand the new media much more better. So they often come to us to seek help how they would evaluate a lot of the online content, and I think we are able to give them a good solution within stipulated budget and within tight timelines. We are able to deliver on using the ad check program.
Excellent. Well, I really want to thank you, Partha, for coming in and talking to us about this. It's just been really great to have you on.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thanks, Duncan.
We'll see you around the office. And there you have it. If you'd like to read more about Insightrix ad testing, you can read a case study on Insightrix.com describing how we recently worked with a client, Affinity Credit Union, in a brand video evaluation project. Just check under the Resources tab and follow the links. And if you'd like to learn more about Insightrix Ad Check, you can get more information at offers.insightrix.com/Insightrix-ad-check. Don't worry, we'll post a link on the podcast webpage so you won't have any trouble finding it. Insightrix would like to thank Majid Khoury for taking the time out of what is a very busy schedule to speak with us about this subject. We really appreciate him sharing his ample experience and insight about advertising testing with us for the episode. I'd also like to thank our own Partha Roy. Having access to his experience and understanding of consumer behavior and ad testing really added a great deal to the show. And of course, as always, we'd like to thank you, our loyal and rapidly growing fan base. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode, and like and review the show. It's a great way to make sure the podcast gets in front of other people who have an interest in market research. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks with another episode of Stories of Market Research, the Insightrix Podcast.